We are going to continue to bring more reaction on the passing of Archbishop Emeritus Desmond Tutu. As I mentioned earlier, he passed away today at the age of 90 in Cape Town. He was South Africa's last surviving laureate of the Nobel Peace Prize. We are going to be in conversation with former public protector advocate Thuli Madonsela. She joins us now just to continue our reflections of this passing of the Archbishop. Thuli, thank you so much for your time, and thank you, of course, for joining us. Just give us your initial thoughts on the passing of the Archbishop. We've heard so many people describe this moment as being one that has, shocked them, one that has devastated them. But right next to those feelings of sorrow and mourning, many people encouraging South Africans to also celebrate the life of the Archbishop.
I join fellow South Africans and the world in mourning the passing of one of the greatest human beings I've ever known. Of course, it is a time to celebrate, but it's also a time to mourn, because we're mourning a person who we need most right now, a voice for reconciliation and forgiveness, a voice for justice as a condition for peace, and an anti-corruption voice. So my heart goes out to Mpilo, Tutu and the family, but I hope she finds solace in the fact that his was a life well lived and a life that will be missed, but will never be lost.
You speak of how he was an individual who stood against corruption. It does seem that, he was an activist right up until the end. But I think something that is worth noting, an activist across all sectors, not just politically, but in terms of a lot of health issues. A lot of advancements were made in this country when we look back at the pandemic, at the HIV and AIDS pandemic, certainly. He was a voice of reason during that time. When I look at, when South Africa was dealing with a lot of vaccine uncertainty, again, he was a voice of reason. So truly an activist right till the end. Your reflections on his contributions, Thuli?
You're right that he was a voice for justice, and therefore whenever he sensed injustice, he used his power, his voice, and the position that God has granted him to speak out against injustice, whether it was the injustice of corruption, because corruption is an injustice. It is a violation of many rights, including the right to equality. He spoke out, as you see it, on the issue of HIV and the need to treat everyone with Ubuntu. He spoke out about the need for antiretrovirals to be accessible to everyone, and of course the vaccine for it to be made accessible equitably. He also spoke out on matters that made him unpopular, such as the issue of Palestine, where people confuse anti-Semitism with criticizing Israel.
Indeed. Thuli, just something else that has come up in a lot of the reflections that we've heard today concerning the Archbishop was his love of people. You talk about how he was an advocate for justice in the face of injustice. Many have, mentioned today that they believe the source of that was the sort of unconditional love that he had for people. He had a heart for humanity. And that's why in the face of adversity, in the face of, violence, in the face of hatred, he could speak things like truth, and he could speak of things such as peace, and he could, speak of things such as reconciliation in the face of a lot that was against him and the time that he was in.
That's true. His pursuit of justice sprang from a heart of love. He deeply loved humanity, and my interaction with him left me with the distinct impression that his love for humanity drove him to make the world aware that everyone deserves to be treated justly, equitably. That's why he was strong on matters of social justice. And even the issue of corruption, he pursued it from the very same heart of love of humanity, because he knew that corruption destroys everything that we love. But above all, it destroys justice.
Yeah. You know, President Cyril Ramaphosa, in his statement on the passing of the Archbishop, talked about how it does seem as though with the passing of the Archbishop, South Africa is marking the closure of a chapter of sorts of these sort of iconic individuals, outstanding individuals, a generation or a crop of leaders from a time that stood for ideals that really contributed to liberating this country. And I wonder, and I suppose this is a question that will be faced by a number of South Africans, if we believe in our current crop of leaders, if we believe that they, you know, hold to the same ideals, and, you know, if whether or not they've sort of carried on the baton that was handed over by the likes of Tutu, the likes of the late former President Nelson Mandela. The list is endless. Anti-apartheid activists, stalwarts, human rights activists who've all, in the face of injustice, have stood for justice. Have we done enough to ensure that that legacy lives on, that the South Africa we wish to forge now can honor those memories?
It doesn't look like we've done enough to make sure that the legacy of Bishop Tutu, Nelson Mandela, Oliver Tambo, Helen Suzman, and all of those good people lives on. But the truth is, leaders like Archbishop Desmond Tutu do not die, they multiply. If you think of, for example, Bishop Thabo Makgoba, he is made of the same kind of DNA as Bishop Desmond Tutu. He may not, of course, have this gap of combining humor with serious speaking truth to power, but the essence of their DNA is the same. And every day I come across young people, black, white, women, men, foreigner and national, abled and disabled, who give me a sense of hope that the leaders we keep looking for are right here among us.
But is there a sense of despondency or doubt, at least in South African society, that such leaders still exist? One can get battered and bruised by headlining news of corruption, of graft, of corrupt government officials, of a government that doesn't care about its people. And once upon a time, there were individuals like the Archbishop, who was a clergyman, who wasn't necessarily in the world of politics, but was able to stand up to corrupt political individuals. I think the question is whether or not in today's world we would still be able to rise up to such a call, whether or not we still are made of the same sort of DNA that you're talking about, that you've identified in the Archbishop Thabo Makgoba. Is that something that is saturated in our society, or have we learned to sort of turn a blind eye to the ills that we see in society? We've sort of coached ourselves into being able to do that so that we can deal with the overload of it all. Are we really the people that you are describing presently?
I respect what the President has said, and I respect how you and many South Africans feel. But I honestly believe we have more leaders like Bishop Tutu today than during his time. I just think that the mistake that is made here is that whenever we're looking for leadership, whenever we're looking for a voice on what's going on around us, we're looking for politicians. I mean, on any social issue, think about it. I'm one of the few lucky ones or privileged ones who get interviewed on these social matters, but most of the times, the voices that we ask for are voices of politicians. If we affirm social leadership, as happened during the time of Bishop Tutu, we will discover that there are many great people among us. Because you remember how Bishop Tutu and Nelson Mandela and others rose to power. They were not political leaders per se. They were social leaders, because in politics, that leadership space had been closed up to people like him. And therefore, they were celebrated as social leaders. I think that we should start giving space to social leaders. We just give far too much space to political leaders, even if sometimes they say things that are so contrary to our constitution and the commitment we gave to each other when we adopted our constitution.
All right, that was former Public Protector Thuli Madonsela joining us on the line there, helping us to again reflect on the passing of Archbishop Desmond Tutu.